Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. And I am going to start the vlog for the July wrap-up video. Reading is a little slow so far this month. Not because of the quality of most of what I've read. I do have one DNF. And, yeah, I'm going to talk about the DNF first, just so it's chronologically at the front. And, be forewarned, ranting coming. This is Founding Mother by Stephanie Dray and Laura Kamoy, and we all know I was very much looking forward to this book. Guess what? I hard DNF'd it after 3 chapters. And by hard DNF, I mean I was on the verge of hurling it across the room, then to go pick it up and light it on fire. The prologue is fantastic. The prologue had me sobbing. I could recognize Abigail and John Adams in the prologue. Like, no problem whatsoever. I could recognize the Adams. It was a amazing portrayal of their bond and their love and their relationship. I was all in. Then chapter 1 happened, and the entire tone changed. Abigail was unrecognizable. John was absent, and there was no wider context to what is taking place in chapter 1. And if you don't know revolutionary history or, colonial history before the revolution starts, and the book does start before the revolution occurs, you will have no idea what is being established moving forward, because there is massive context missing from this fictional account. And without the context, her story, her life make no sense. I read chapter 1. And I was irritated. I'm going to be polite and say irritated. I then read chapter 2, which jumps... I'm checking. 5 years from the first chapter, and no context about what happens in those 5 years. And chapter 3 is 3 months, 2 months after chapter 2, so the time jump isn't as bad. And I stopped on chapter 4, which then skips to 1773, 3 whole years. Again, no context. And by this time, I have texted Amanda, who I knew was also reading it. I'm like, what in the name of all that is holy is going on in this book? She's like, oh, wait till you get to page 79. And that was roughly 40 pages from where I was. So I read page 79, which is chapter 11. And at that point, I was done. So, It is a very surface level portrayal of Abigail Adams. There is no context for what is going on. And the authors decided to heavily lean into the proto-feminist myth. The feminist movement has built up around Abigail Adams. And that was my breaking point. It was very obvious. On page 79, it was gnawing at me in the first 3 chapters. Chapters are short, by the way. And I went and I read the author's notes, and they do admit that yes, they believe she's a feminist and they wrote her that way. She absolutely was not. Abigail Adams came back today and had the slightest idea of what she is being portrayed as, she would be incensed, to put it politely. Yes, she does at one point write John before the revolution as we're starting to attempt to govern ourselves and we're fed up as a nation, to remember the ladies as he's drawing up new laws. And that has been twisted from what she meant. Abigail believed that women deserved to be educated right alongside boys for as long as they wanted, and the quality of education should not be diminished, and they should not be prevented from going to school. And that's what she meant. It's clear as a bell when you read her letters, and you don't cherry pick phrases from them. She believed that women best suited their roles, their nature, their makeup, by being at home and raising kids and taking care of the household and the homestead and helping their husbands. She did not. She says this in other letters. She's one of her famous female friends who, would fit the proto-feminist myth much better, was Mercy Otis Warren. And Abigail is worried the first time she meets her that she's going to be unfeminine because she is earning money outside the house and she's a published authoress and she writes plays. And Abigail doesn't have the concept that you can be feminine and still work outside the home. That she never changed that. At no point in her life does that change. She and John have a 54-year marriage. They love each other from the beginning until the end of Abigail's life. Abigail dies first. John lives 8 or 9 years after Abigail, and he misses her every single day. They spent 10 years apart. They were the best of friends. And in the first 3 chapters, she's dismissive of John. She's, quote unquote, according to the book, disappointed in John's reaction. And dropped a book. That wouldn't have happened. Wouldn't have been, I highly do not recommend this book. In fact, I am so disillusioned that I own 2 others. One on Audible, one I picked up from my library bookshop. So, I have finished a couple of other books. Today is the 13th. And 2 of them I'm going to mention briefly because they're in the vlog that releases on the 17th of this week, which I will link in the description box down below. The first is How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Dorn. Nonfiction. Loved it. Recommended by Anne. Highly recommend reading it. Highly applicable to nonfiction reads. And in case you haven't watched the vlog yet, I needed silence to read this one. It is fantastic, but my brain needed silence. So, and I can normally read when there's, dogs barking, chickens clucking, video games going, and, just general noise happening, and I couldn't with this one, so. And I have also, same vlog, finished The Odyssey by Homer. Absolutely 5-star. If I didn't already know what my book of the year was, this would be in contention, but it didn't have the same emotional gut punch for me. I recommend reading the Iliad first because the Iliad takes place prior to the events of the Odyssey, and the Odyssey deals with Odysseus's journey home from Troy. So it was fantastic. Has changed my reading moving forward, but that is a discussion for probably much later this year. Okay, so I have 2 other books finished, which it just feels like I'm missing something, and if I am, I don't know what it is, so I couldn't possibly be missing it. Okay, first up would be The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. This is a PI, so PI July. In this edition, it's 217 pages, and this book will never, ever be published today. It would not get past a literary agent, let alone ever make it to a publishing house. Why, you might be asking? Because our main character is male. Sam is very much a product of his era, and this was first published in 1929. He is a World War I vet. He doesn't put up with nonsense. He isn't highly deferential to women. He says what he thinks. He is more than willing to use a woman to get the information he needs to proceed. He basically take your modern male and just the exact opposite. And that would be Sam Spade. Especially in this book. I will tell you, the Sam in this book was toned down for the radio series. He's still quintessentially Sam, but he's not in the radio dramas. He does not sleep with women to get his information, if that is the best way forward. And he does in The Maltese Falcon. I am going to borrow the movie from the library and watch it. I, believe it or not, have never seen it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm probably going to go pick up Philip Marlowe that's on my Kindle this week, and it's just, it was fantastic. I don't want to say too much because I'll give it away. I will tell you it was twisty and turny and
too much.
So, Sam, one of my favorite characters of all time. If you like strong male protagonists, Dashiell Hammett is your man. And he wrote some other stuff. I need to see if my library has it. Some of them I didn't know he wrote, so I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on my list. Okay, and so far, the last book I have finished is Tea for Trespass by Sue Grafton. This is a Kinsey Millhone PI novel. It is set in the fictional town of, just flew out of my head, Santa Teresa. It's clearly north of LA, south of San Francisco, and on the coast, town setting. And this is not a murder investigation. It is just Kinsey, doing Kinsey things. She's doing some process serving for her regular clients. She's doing a little, fraud investigation. But what the story is really focused on is her neighbor is late 80s. Late 80s? Yeah. And he falls, he dislocates his shoulder, and what happens from that point forward? It is an elder abuse case. Just going to tell you right now. It is full of twists and turns and humor and relationships, and how the main message is how easy it is to overlook the elder abuse that may or may not be happening because you're so caught up in your everyday life. It gets overlooked. Not because you're evil or willful or any of those things, but just because you're human and life happens. If it's not someone you're used to checking it up on every day, you're not going to make a point of insinuating yourself into the situation. And it's a very well written novel. I've enjoyed every one of these books I have read. There is no nonsense in them. They are set in the mid 80s. This one was published in 2007. I need to finish the series. I have no qualms about picking them up. Again, it is a novel of relationships. Yes, she's doing some private, her profession is a private investigator. She is living her life and doing her job, and the abuse is happening, and she's not aware that it's going on, and she's not being neglectful. Her neighbor isn't her family member. It isn't anyone she's legally responsible for. But it talks about, it shows what is possible when we get so busy we fail to see what's happening right next door. So, highly recommend Tea for Trespass. If you want to read them in order, highly recommend A for Alibi. And you will soon immerse yourself. They are not challenging reads, but they're not especially easy reads either. There are characters that are related but not related. It's a whole thing. And yeah, go pick up Milholm. Go pick up Grafton novels. You won't be sorry. There may be some mild swearing in here, but it isn't littered with F words like the Stephanie Plum series by Janet Ivanovich became littered with at the tail end of, or at least where I stopped reading. So I highly recommend these. Okay, I will see you here next time. Okay, it's time for another reading update. And I realized, before I do that, editing Tammy, I realized I never published my July pop. Believe it or not, I filmed one. It is sitting on my phone. I just got so busy with other things in life. I, for the first time ever, failed to publish it, and I apologize. But life happens. Okay. Now, back to regularly scheduled content. We are at my kitchen table today because it is miserably hot outside. I have beans I need to shell, and I need to talk about some DNFs because reasons. I will tell you right up front, July has been a very hit or miss month. More misses than hits. More misses than anything, to be honest. And there's another book that's a DNF for me, and it is as big a disappointment as A Founding Mother, just for different reasons. So, first, let's go to my just casual DNF. I had Summer by Edith Wharton on my July pile of possibilities. Perfect time to read it. It's a classic. It's not too small. I picked it up from the library bookshop. And, well, I'm 7,500 pages into a 216-page book. I don't care. Not only do I not care, it is just another rinse and repeat tragic love story of a young woman who gets involved with a man and there are consequences. None of that has happened yet, but that's clearly where it's going. And I don't particularly enjoy those types of stories to begin with. I do not care enough about the character to figure out, to continue to read her sad tale of woe. I don't. So far, I mean, she's a typical teenager, selfish, self-centered, the whole 9 yards. She may be in her early 20s, but I'm over it. Over it. Very, very over it. So that is being discontinued or DNF'd. It is going to go back to the library. I have 2 other Edith Whartons on my shelves. If those fail, then I am done with Edith Wharton, and I don't have a problem with that. Okay, so the next book is my DNF that is almost as troublesome for me, and it was a buddy read with Taylor. That is To Crown with Liberty by Karen Yulo. This is Catholic historical fiction. Taylor and I were supposed to read this last July. Life happened. We decided to read it this July, which was fine. I DNF this book at 86%. So, it is the story of a young French noble, and you meet her when she is 7, and you follow her life from there, who is very typical for her time period. The book opens up in 1795 in New Orleans, and the first chapter in France is 1771. Okay, 1771. She is born in 1771. She is the only surviving child of her parents, who are French nobility, who are in service to the monarchs. Her mother gives birth to her and immediately hands her off to another family to raise, nurse, bond with the child. Okay, this is normal behavior. I don't have a problem with this. At 7, her mother returns, rips her away from the family, only family she's really ever known. She occasionally got visits from her parents, but they weren't really worth, they weren't anything more than, I'm doing my duty and checking in type of thing. So she rips her away at 7, hands her off to a governess at the big old house, the family seat, and once again disappears back into Paris. And this is a pattern repeated by her parents, and in particular her mother. And I understood from the beginning why she had trauma, surrounding abandonment, because she is repeatedly uprooted and has no stable family structure she can rely on. Okay, so I get all that. So every other chapter is supposedly in Louisiana. Or not supposedly, they are, every other chapter. And then in France. Now, if you know your French history, by the time she's in her 20s, in her formative teenage years, revolution is coming to France. And the chapters in Louisiana are very sparse. They could have been much more interesting than they were. The chapters in France are much longer, obviously, because, obvious reasons. The French Revolution is much better known. It is a much more exciting period of history. Lots of things to talk about, lots of political stuff going on, So set the book in France. Don't have this other timeline going on in Louisiana. French timeline would have been sufficient. Not enough time is spent in Louisiana. And what time is spent in Louisiana further infuriates the reader as to our main character. She is incredibly selfish. She is incredibly self-centered. I get it. I understand this time period in France. I understand what's going on in Louisiana, which at this time is a Spanish colony. But so eventually her parents decide that she is going to wed her first cousin, who is the only male heir to the family line and everything that comes with it. And so she's going to marry her cousin Abner. Okay, it's common at this time in nobility circles for that to occur. It isn't overly shocking. Some of these seeds are not great. But she falls in love with him and she fawns all over him, and he really does not return her affection. fact, you spend most of your time with Abner frustrated. He is clearly a workaholic. He is clearly conflicted between, noble duty and revolutionary causes. And Alex, who's our main character, female, can only think of herself. Like, you know that line about Marie Antoinette saying, "Let them eat cake," which, by the way, she never said. That is the epitome of Alex. She cannot see or sympathize with anyone else. And it isn't a one-off. It isn't, teenage angst. It's, she marries Abner. She's a married woman. She still has feelings for the man who becomes her second husband, but she pushes them down, and I have a 20-minute rant I sent to my girlfriends about this book, explaining it in detail, and I'm trying not to do that here. I will say, she expresses herself to be a devout Catholic. She does all of the outward things. She, however, does not practice what she professes. And this is in Louisiana. She is just outraged by slavery. Okay, I can understand that. It's outlawed in France at the time. It is prohibited by the church. I get that. And then you get another French chapter, and she fails to even remotely comprehend that she treats her servants, of which her milk brother that she's in love with, named Joseph, as nothing more than paid slaves. I am not joking here. So eventually, as Paris is caught in the reign of terror, their Paris home is attacked. And Abner sacrifices himself and pushes her out the window where he knows Joseph is waiting to catch her so that she can escape. Joseph gets her away. Okay? Abner sacrifices himself, knowing full well it's very likely that he's going to at least be imprisoned, if not just executed outright. And a couple days pass, and she tells Joseph she needs to go back and, collect her clothing because she's wearing the rags that one of Joseph's brother's wives managed to find for her. And it's too much for her. It isn't quality. Joseph, being Joseph, agrees to take her back. I'm not going to describe what goes on in the house and how she treats the one remaining servant they have. Eventually, she goes upstairs to her bedroom where she is shocked to discover all of her clothing is gone. She's outraged. But eventually, she gathers herself and collects her makeup. And what does she do? This hothouse little French noble flower? She passes it off to Joseph to carry for her because obviously it's beneath her. She has no regard for the feelings of anyone else. So they're leaving the house. Joseph has her makeup, and he's like, we'll find you something better to wear. She's like, no, it's fine. I'm going to go to the prison and be with Abner, my husband. What now? He made it so that you could escape, so that you could survive, and you're going to go to the prison without thinking. Just, my place is with my husband. Oh, okay. Really not surprised. You're a selfish, entitled little nonsensical. And what does she do right before she flees to the prison? She flings herself at Joseph and kisses him. And then gets mad that he, A, returns the kiss, and B, pushes her away, calling her, what did he call her? Siren. And she's all mad. Why did he kiss me back? Like, really? Why did he kiss you back? I wonder, you flung yourself at him. You are a married woman, and you profess to be this devout Catholic, and yet you... Let me move. Some more stuff happens. They're in Louisiana. By this time, she knows she's pregnant. And she's continuing to be a self-centered, horrible human being. And she realizes that she's pregnant, and she's having all this PTSD flashback symptoms and drama, and I'll get to that in a second. And the point at which I DNF'd at 86%, she calls her unborn child a coward who is tainted by her blood. That was it. I was done. I absolutely will not. No. 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 So I set the book aside. I vented about this book a lot. There are throughout the book, like from the opening pages of the book, she's fainting and blacking out and falling unconscious and having an attack of the vapors, basically, right, left, and center. Look, I understand you went through some stuff in Paris. I understand it was probably pretty terrifying, but you're in a different spot now. There are all kinds of new dangers facing you, and well, you're going to become a very quick and potent liability because you're constantly passing out. And it was pathetic. I mean, you take the Southern Belle, Attack of the Vapors, the whole Victorian thing, multiply it by a factor of, I don't know, 10 billion, and you have Alex. So irritating. And the other major problem in this book, and it was a very big problem, Taylor and I both noticed it as soon as it happened. At one point, early on in the book, she meets Thomas Jefferson at a dinner party with her parents and Abner. And Thomas Jefferson leers at her chest and can't take his eyes off her. That is not the personality of Thomas Jefferson. None of his contemporaries recorded it. He was no Ben Franklin, who was an absolute horn dog his entire life. Jefferson, no. But early on in the book, he's leering at Alex. Oh, that should have been my first red flag. I should have listened to that red flag because no. Just no. So, I obviously had some issues. Not reading anymore. Apparently this book is very highly rated on Goodreads and Storyograph, and I don't understand why. Somebody compared it to Gone with the Wind, and I am sorry, but no. If you think Scarlett O'Hara is a self-centered Catholic child, she has nothing on this character, and to even equate them is to defame Scarlett's character. I am sorry. It is... no. And this is a very toned down version of what I told my girlfriends. I'm not gonna lie, this is a very toned down version. So yeah, it has not been a great reading month in July. I have some good ones, which I haven't finished yet, so I haven't talked about them. But when they're bad, they are bad this month, and it's gonna make August interesting. Okay, next clip. I take that back. One more thing. Eventually, while Alex and Abner are in prison, all of the prisoners are taken upstairs. They're in prison in a former monastery into the church, and they are given a sham trial, and 2 by 2 they are executed. Knowing this is coming, their parish priest, who also happens to have been in jail, grants. So all the religious in the church at this sham trial are, they know they're about to be executed. So their parish priest is there. He offers them the sacrament of confession. They both partake. Sorry, the dog keeps interrupting the trash man's here. And everybody in the room understands that, they are out of options, right? So all the religious are executed. Abner and his sister are called up as the next pair. His sister happens to be a nun. Don't get me started. And Alex then throws herself on the mercy of the court, begging to go with Abner. And Abner at this point risks his immortal soul, tells a lie, and says, "Oh, she's my servant. She was in the prison to bring me, to make my life more comfortable. She has nothing to do with it." He tells just this big, flat out fib, sacrificing his state of grace in sacrificial love to save Alexa's life. It's successful. She escapes, obviously, because she's now married to Joseph in Louisiana. And she's mad at Abner for it, that she didn't get to die. And she calls herself a coward, and she calls her unborn child a coward. Just worst character of the month. Just hands down. And as I told my girlfriends, Alex is vying with Mr. Poop Potato Mark Watney for the worst character in my entire life. It is a very close thing. Okay, now I'm done ranting. Okay, it is time to wrap up my July reading. Luckily, July ended on a fabulous note. But it once again shows that my July reading was either fabulous or impossibly awful. There was very little, if any, middle ground in that reading month. So, as I film this, it is the 4th of August. And yeah. Okay, so I did finish 1776 by David McCullough. This was, I put a book club read up on Fable. It isn't going anywhere if you didn't finish it. If you want to come back and add your comments later, it will be there for a little while. I absolutely loved this book. All of my comments are on Fable. I'm not going to talk about them extensively here. However, McCullough does a fabulous job of putting 1776 into perspective from not just the American point of view, but the English point of view. And you meet characters who you've known since grammar school if you're American. You know, King George, George Washington, and rather than the narrative we are all taught as we children, at the time the Revolutionary War breaks out, George III isn't mad yet. He's perfectly sane. He is in control of his kingdom and his empire, and he knows what's going on. He has not yet descended into regency. He's not even close to that. You get both sides of the British argument. All those who are pro just squashing the rebellion and bringing Americans to heel, and then you also get the British members of parliament and state who are pro-American. You get that in the very first chapter, all of that starts coming out. You meet Americans, you know, Alexander Hamilton. You meet an 18-year-old James Monroe, and Abigail Adams has a couple of quotes in here. The bravery of Henry Knox in 1776 will absolutely knock your socks off. And these are not professional military men. They are not old soldiers. None of that. These are just men who want their freedom. And what they're willing to undergo and risk to attain it is humbling. And it is perfectly well researched. There is an extensive bibliography at the end. There are quotes from letters and journals throughout. You get a very human depiction of the men who risked their lives to establish the country we take for granted. And even if you don't enjoy reading history, this is a very approachable read. It is I'm going to say it's a very narrative read, but not in the sense that it's telling you a story, in the sense that it is cohesive and it flows well and you're not having to double back to look things up. It presents the facts without it being a dry, overly academic, unapproachable read for the non-historian. I highly recommend this book. Like I said in the announcement video for the book club read, it's undoubtedly in your library. So go pick up 1776, read it at your leisure, and realize just how blessed we are. And as you read it, you will begin to understand that it is very hard not to believe the hand of God was at work in the establishment of the United States. If you know, you know. Okay, and the last book I finished in July was Victory at Yorktown by Newt Gingrich and William Forstchen. This is the third and final book in the George Washington trilogy series. Absolute 5-star for me. It is a fabulous read that very aptly portrays the perilous situation this nation was in 1781. So, 1781, the war has been dragging on. The citizenry is exhausted. The troops are To say morale is low is an understatement. They haven't been paid. They certainly haven't been paid in anything that would be worth anything. And Washington and his staff realize that the country is at a tipping point. They either win and win decisively and end the rebellion, or it's over. And it's going to be up to, a future generation to successfully break away from Britain and be a free people. And it's very clear how dire the situation is. By the time they have marched from New York to Philadelphia, enlistments are up. They have British sitting in Philadelphia, or not Philadelphia, New York. They have Cornwallis in Yorktown, and French Navy hasn't shown up yet. It's very bad. And yet, we win. We win, and we win decisively, in large part because of the French. The French made it possible. They brought us food and armaments and ammunition and the ability to, and troops, blockaded Cornwallis in at Yorktown, which made the whole thing possible. And if you know your history, you understand that the threads of revolution for France, are being laid in America as this victory occurs. It's just going to take a little bit of time in France, and it's going to go much differently. But this entire series truly makes you understand the cost our ancestors paid and what it took to get to the point that we are now. And I'm keeping this on my shelves. Could I pass it down? Yes. Am I willing to risk it, being chopped up by AI at this point? Absolutely, I am not. And that is definitely a consideration going forward. So this series is staying on my shelves. Okay, that is everything I read. Good, bad. Cannot wait to get it out of my house in July. And I am praying it turns around in August. As I record this, I already have 2 DNFs for the month of August. Stay tuned for those. And yeah, would I read July again? I absolutely would. Just skipping the really bad stuff. If I skipped the really bad stuff, July was a fantastic reading month. Just when it went bad, it went really, really bad. How was your July? Let me know in the comments down below. Like and subscribe. And I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.